again, welcome to Along the Rock, our visual podcast that kind of pays homage to the people of the Sauk Valley and the valley and the people who inhabit it, and the river, of course, that runs through it. I'm Mark Morris. I'll be your host today. My guests are a couple of Sterling Police Department detectives, Clay Hadley and Tanner Wilhelm. And gentlemen, thanks for coming up.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, seeing our big studio here.
Yeah.
Just a little about your own background. Full disclosure, neither of you has worked on a trafficking case per se yet, but you're both fairly early in your careers. Why don't we start with you, Clay, and just tell us how long you've been around and how long you've been a detective.
Yeah, I'm from Sterling. I grew up in Sterling. I have 10 years on with the Sterling Police Department. Over that time, I spent about 4 years on as a patrolman. I spent 3 years in the schools, the Sterling schools, as a school resource officer. That covers both the high school and the junior high. And then the last 3 years, I've been assigned to the investigations for the police department. And that's more of like a general assignment. So we handle everything. We handle everything from, burglaries to murders.
So if anyone says, anyone above you says, yeah, you guys take this one, you say, yes, sir.
Yeah. Feel like we say yes, sir, a lot.
Tanner, what about you? What's your background like?
So, Tanner Wilhelm. I have been with the Sterling Police Department for about 8 years now. It'll be 8 years in April. I grew up in Amboy, Illinois, a little bit of a smaller town, but still kind of around the area, not too far from here. Started as, like everyone else, started as a patrol officer, did that for about 4 years, and the detective position opened up. So I've been doing that for the last 3.5 years. Like Clay said, we're kind of general assignment detectives, so we handle a little bit of everything. We get kind of experience in every different investigations, like he said, burglaries, to homicides, to sex assaults, all that type of stuff.
I would imagine sex assaults might, in some cases, lead us to what our major topic is today, which is human trafficking, because a lot of the human trafficking has to do with forced sex, and so experience with sex assaults probably has done you well to try to get you prepared for the bigger picture of sexual assaults in the cases of human trafficking, because those are the most common ones, according to the research I've done the last couple of days. Crime prevention, of course, is always in the police officers' bailiwick, whether they be detectives or any other position. And community policing that's a phrase that's used a lot these days too. So if we could, and I'll be asking you some opinions as we go, but how would you tell people to keep an eye out for human trafficking, just in general? I mean, you've obviously had training, and there are certain people who are more vulnerable to human trafficking, and there must be certain techniques that they use to get people involved before they actually start forcing them into what they don't want to do. Could you, Clay, start with that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot, some of the, I don't want to say experience, but some of my knowledge with the sex trafficking, or even human trafficking, they're kind of two different entities, is isolation. A lot of criminals, really all criminals, are based off of opportunity, whether it's a burglary or a homicide or sex trafficking.
Sure.
So, trying to, they're looking for the opportunity. And how they do that is they try to isolate people. They try to find people who are already going to be isolated to some degree, and then they try to isolate them even further. So if you're somebody, a lot of times for the direct victim, how do you prevent it? Sometimes it's more of their friends and family, to look for the cues that maybe one of your family members is showing that could be getting trafficked, which would be, they seem isolated. They're hanging out with maybe an older person.
Yeah.
They seem disoriented, or they just, maybe they got some new, different tattoos. So, not having a ton of experience is, for me personally, it's a little harder to speak on. But I know some of those types of things, can be things to look for in a family member or even a friend.
Sure. Tanner, any different perspectives coming from you?
I would kind of agree with that. Kind of like you led us into with the sex assaults and the human trafficking. Obviously, it can kind of correlate in two things. You might see a lot of the same things in the victims of each, whether it's just a simple sex assault case or it is a more extensive human trafficking case or sex trafficking case. And just like Detective Hadley said, things to look for is changes in behaviors, changes in moods. Maybe they're not as happy-go-lucky as they once were, whether it's depression, anxiety, or things like that develop. And some things, obviously, it can be hard to notice for sure, because some people kind of go through it, and you would never know that they're going through something. And I wouldn't say necessarily that these are some signs that we can look for and things like that, but there's also times that, like I said, that you don't know that anything's going on, and there's not, and the victim can be anyone, essentially. Just because these are signs that we're looking for, if they don't show these signs, it doesn't mean that they're not involved in some of this stuff. Obviously everyone thinks, when they think human trafficking or sex trafficking, you're probably thinking younger female victims, but human trafficking can be anyone. It can be, males, it can be, obviously the easier targets are the people that are isolated and things like that. But that doesn't mean those are the only people that are being targeted.
And there's trafficking involving workplaces too.
Absolutely.
Which I thought about, especially when it involves, and I don't want to cast any aspersions on certain places, but a Chinese restaurant, that would seem to lend itself, because there are times when you go in and then language is a barrier. If you're talking to somebody that doesn't speak English or doesn't speak English very well, and makes you kind of wonder as to whether they're working here on their own or whether they were told to work here and maybe they're not making even minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and that's to your point with the pay and the minimum wage. Those are things. When people think of human trafficking, I think they automatically think of the sex trade, but there's also, like to your point, the work trade. And you don't want to cast aspersions, like you said, but a lot of times, whether it's immigrants or migrants who are working, whether they're, if they're working at a place where they're making $2-3 an hour, or they happen to be living the same place that they're working,
right,
or having to, give some sort of, if they're getting paid and they have to give their boss or the owner some form of payment as well. Those are also things that can be looked at as human trafficking as well.
Yeah, I got to think that slaughterhouses are probably another likely place where that could happen. Mm-hmm. And there's some others too, but those are the two that come to mind.
A lot of agricultural work as well. Farming and stuff like that people have large amounts of people, whether it be migrants or whoever, that are making a lot less money than what they should be or what is legal.
Mm-hmm. Well, they just arrested about 6 guys, some from Winnebago County area, some not. I think there were a couple from Wisconsin that arrested 6 people for trafficking. And as I understand it, although you talked to them and they didn't really want to share too much, which I guess is not unusual among police departments during a breaking case, but that it seemed to be based on the charges, a lot of sex-related trafficking. And some of it involved, again, based on the charges that I saw, among younger children. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's got to be one of the scariest scenarios a parent or any other relative can think of.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking to the conscience, for what we have to deal with. Obviously we sign up to do it, but it's still almost impossible to really be prepared for it. And detectives like us that do the general assignment that are in a smaller area, the reason we don't deal with sex trafficking a whole lot isn't because it doesn't exist, but a lot of these times they're multi-jurisdictional. Right. So they may be in Rockford, but then they're going to Peoria or Davenport or wherever. Not that I know, not to disparage those cities, but it's just for us. If and when we have those, it's more feasible for a state task force or a federal task force to take that on, because it may be happening in multiple different areas with the same offenders and unfortunately with the same victims as well.
And to avoid capture, if you will, they do like to move around, and sometimes across state lines, and that's when the FBI gets in on it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think what becomes shocking, and I can kind of relate this to us as well, even just as general assignment detectives, you know, a good majority of our caseload is sex cases, essentially. That's a big major crime that we investigate. And I think that becomes shocking to the public. They don't realize that, how much of that actually happens. And I think that's kind of to your point about human trafficking and sex trafficking. They don't realize how much it actually goes on and where it happens at. We're talking about this case with the state police. It looked like what they kind of put out, one of the guys was from the Pecatonica area, which is a real small town.
Yeah.
It's not a very big, you know, but these guys are from all over, like Detective Hadley said. It's kind of multi-jurisdictional, so it leads to a bigger entity investigating it, but it shows that, you know, this happens everywhere. And, you know, it's not just in the bigger cities. It's not just like, I think one of these guys was maybe from Wisconsin, some from the Rockford area, but again, one from the Pecatonica area, and just it can happen anywhere. That's kind of the concerning part about it, and kind of just the shocking part, I think, as well.
yeah, and I think you're right. A lot of people just, for some reason, maybe because they haven't seen it, again, around here, they can't believe this is even happening, let alone it's a big problem, because it is a big problem in a lot of places. So this was another scary thing that I just read. Other than traffickers luring people in, it says there's no evidence that traffickers are more likely to be of a particular race, nationality, gender, or sexual orientation. They may be family members, romantic partners, acquaintances, or strangers. Now, you would think maybe only strangers.
Yeah.
Not true.
Yeah, and I think to the relationship side of it, you know, I know of cases or hearing about different things and training of, you know, somebody may start a dating relationship with somebody who kind of fits this bill of, you know, isolated, or maybe they're looking for some type of companion. And in beginning early on in the relationship, it seems like everything's normal, everything's fine, but then that person gets, the victim, addicted to drugs. So now there's the addiction to drugs, and now because of that addiction, this person that they thought was a boyfriend or a girlfriend, whoever,
He was buying them dinners and giving her nice clothes.
Yeah. So that happens a lot, you know, really. I think it's more of these people seeking these other people out, which is just such a, you know, malicious and, you know, dark thing to think of, that a person can meet another person and kind of have a normal relationship for months, and then all of a sudden they're getting them addicted to drugs and then putting them into the sex trade.
So I guess it's what they call that grooming to the extreme.
Yeah, and it may be, you know, somebody who's older, like an older man with a younger girl who's maybe a teenage girl, but it also could be, you know, a 30-year-old man meeting a 24-year-old girl. It's just all about opportunities. It's all about, you know, these people make a ton of money doing this, so they're always kind of on the lookout to find somebody who meets that, you know, bill or that opportunity of being isolated. And that's what we see with a lot of the sex crimes we investigate as well, that aren't the sex trafficking, but, you know, with the rapes and the, you know, sex assaults with children. It's all about opportunity, you know. It's all about how the offender can isolate that child. And sometimes they don't have to do a whole lot of work to make that happen, depending on that child's home life or friends or family.
Well, and some of it must be incest.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. That's statistically pretty rare when it comes to like a biological parent with their biological child. Majority of what we see, and statistically, you know, is it's going to be a boyfriend or a girlfriend or uncle, somebody like that.
Stepdad?
Yep. Yeah. You know, a step parent, a boyfriend, but sometimes an uncle too, which would fit that incest bill. But, you know, rarely do we see biological dad or mom do something to one of their biological kids.
If someone thinks they're witnessing a scenario that looks like human trafficking, for instance, somebody somebody's hanging out around a motel and they keep seeing people coming in and out of the motel, and perhaps the person who wants to report it works at the motel, so they would notice that sort of thing. Could start with a housekeeper at the motel. What should somebody who is not in law enforcement do? What's the first thing? Is 911 always the answer?
I mean, really what I tell people, and I know bigger cities probably have a different perspective on this to some degree, but I always say call us. Let us investigate it. Let us decide what we're going to, some people are like, well, I didn't want to call you because I don't want to bother you. I know you guys are busy. It's like, well, so many times the citizens are the ones that, really help us solve crime. I mean, we have to do a lot of the investigating, but so many times we solve crime because of a neighbor witnessed something.
Sure.
Somebody picked up the phone and called us. So if they're seeing a scenario like you've just described, call your local police department. And if they have, any resources that, they can reach out to, like if it was something that, was called to us, we would at least try to initiate the investigation. And if we felt like it was along the lines of sex trafficking, we could get some type of, state task force involved or something to try to take over the investigation. But absolutely, you see something, always call. I tell people always call. Let the law enforcement agencies filter out what they think is going to be useful or not.
Don't approach these people and start asking them questions.
Exactly.
When you notice the gun belt on
Yeah.
under their jacket.
Yeah.
Because the weapons are involved, a lot of times too.
Yeah, these people can be dangerous. You don't know what you're dealing with, so we don't necessarily want people to intervene themselves. But like Clay said, I mean, yeah, definitely call. We'd rather, the police can respond, whatever jurisdiction it is, and then you'd rather, have it reported and go out and investigate it. And if it is nothing, then it's nothing. But if it is something, then okay, we got the ball rolling on that and can kind of continue with the investigative process. Because like he said, the public, that's huge for us. They're the ones that are reporting the crimes. A lot of times we wouldn't know that this is happening unless someone comes and makes a report to us. And that's kind of how we deal with it. And then we can begin our process with that.
Yeah.
It's such a different crime than like a shooting or somebody being assaulted in the road. That's such a violent incident that draws people's attention. Sex trafficking is something that's done behind closed doors, that people, sometimes the police can be late to it unless they get a tip from somebody who happens to see something.
Yeah, it's not obvious at first.
Yeah.
In fact, it may not be obvious at all. Like you say, if the people continue to move around every few days or every few weeks, whatever it is, but you have to dig a little deeper in these cases. So, by the way, anyone who suspects human trafficking is urged to contact. This is a nationwide outfit, the National Human Trafficking Hotline. That's 1-888-373-7888. Again, 1-888-373-7888. Or you can text. The number there is 233-733. The text 233-733. And of course, says these two gentlemen have told you, if you want somebody there faster, if you've seen something or think you've seen something, call them, call their 911 emergency line, because they're the ones that will be able to get there first and fastest. So I thank you guys for coming in. It's been
Thank you for having us.
we
really appreciate it.
To be here.
Yeah.
interesting, and hope we can raise some awareness.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
part of community policing too, I guess, is turning people into little detectives themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's so useful to us. Kind of to my point earlier about people being afraid to call us. It's
In the old days, there were police officers who would say, "Don't get involved. We'll handle it. Don't bother us. We're the cops. You're just the public."
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to be true anymore.
No, it's so different anymore than that. People shouldn't physically get involved. I mean, if you that's a personal choice. If you feel like you need to physically intervene because you feel like someone's being assaulted right now, that's a personal choice. But yeah, for us, you see something, call us. And in today's world, with all the social media, phones, all that type of stuff, You know, there's so many more ways to communicate with us or document.
Even on traffic stops, I mean,
Yeah.
people generally carry their phone in their
Oh, yeah.
car.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
everything's recorded. We got body cams. The public uses their phones. You know, it's hard to find an incident now that's not recorded to some degree, even if the people involved don't know they're being recorded.
Yeah.
Usually somebody's recording something.
All right, well, thanks again, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Also like to thank our crew for allowing us to put this program on a regular basis. I'm Mark Morris, and I hope you can join us next time along the rock.